When I was 42, I sort of got hit with this like wrecking ball symptoms that just completely floored me. I was questioning my marriage and I was questioning the fact, did I love my children? It was pretty bad. A couple of years later, I went to a gynecologist for some type of a routine appointment. It said to me, you're not losing your mind, you're just losing your estrogen and you're in menopause. And I was sort of like, go fuck yourself. I'm 44 and I'm not in menopause. There's a couple of neuroscientists in the US that are looking at brain scans in perimenopause. We see that our brain shrinks. So that's when a lot of women will have these things like brain fog and confusion and they lose words. And it's making women leave work and leave marriages, and it's horrible. The genital urinary symptoms of menopause mean that estrogen is not getting into the pelvic floor area, so women can have painful sex, dry vagina, the skin gets very thin, and recurring infections, incontinence, and these can impact our experience. When I sat and had an honest conversation and I looked at the data that said menopause is not the cause of weight gain, well, that's bullshit. I'm going to find out why. And the more I dug, the more I was like, you know what? The reason we put weight on is literally we're not moving as much as we did and we're eating way more.
Okay, so Amanda, you've written this brilliant book called Menopocalypse. What inspired you to write a book all about a Menopocalypse, and what's the story behind the title?
And it was never on my bingo card, you know, let's write a book about menopause. I always wanted to write a book. I think it's in all of us. And I think mine was going to be about travel or something. You know, I travel a lot. And, you know, I'm a fitness, I'm in the fitness industry and I'm a sort of a veteran now. It's nearly 30 years. I grew up in the UK, did my certification in Loughborough University. That's when you couldn't get your personal training certificate, only in this one place. It was like a diploma there. Took a couple of years to do. And then, you know, I've just been in the industry all this time and never was there a conversation about menopause. I never even thought they should be. You know, like as a woman in the fitness industry, I did pre and postnatal certifications. We've all got those subspecialties. I've worked with pro athletes. I've worked with the NBA team in Texas, the Rockets. So there you go. I like that one. But so I've worked with like women after pregnancy with pro athletes. I've worked with seniors. So I've got this like a good spectrum of clients I've worked with, like most trainers do. And when I was actually doing coaching for menopausal women in Toronto, where I live, women would come into my like small training classes and go, oh, menopause is kicking my ass today. And I'd like go, oh, okay then. And well, here's an alternative exercise. But I was sort of dismissive about it because I didn't really know what they were talking about. I was like, oh, whatever, you get a bit hot, big deal. And they maybe had a little bit of incontinence. So I'd be like, you don't have to skip today, or you can go to the toilet quickly now before we start. You know, I would just make a light of it. And it was ignorance on my part. And so here I am, a 40-year-old woman, dismissing a huge population of women that I'm working with purely because I didn't know. And so long story short, like I go into my 40s being a bit smug, but in a nice way. Like I'm like, oh, look at me, I'm fit, I'm healthy. I'm a good example of how aging doesn't stop us and we can, you know, forge through, etc. And then when I was 42, I sort of got hit with this like wrecking ball in this, you know, of symptoms that just completely floored me. And so essentially I spent 2 years in the Canadian medical system, which is very similar to the NHS in its like structure, but I had good healthcare, really caring doctors, and nobody knew what was wrong with me. And they must have spent thousands on testing for me. And it was then a couple of years later, I went to a gynecologist for some type of a routine appointment. And he sort of said to me, is everything okay? And I was like, no, started crying. And I just opened my heart with all of the symptoms, which we can talk about later if you want. But I opened my heart with all of these symptoms. And he went, hey, listen, I see this day in and day out. You're not losing your mind. You're just losing your estrogen and you're in menopause. And I was sort of like, go fuck yourself. I'm 44 and I'm not in menopause, because I had these preconceived ideas. This was for older women, not someone who looked like me or was fit and healthy like me. And I also thought that it was, you just lost your period. You just got a little bit hot and a bit grumpy maybe. And then that was it. And literally that was it. I went down this rabbit hole and I came out the other side with quite a large community. I think I might have about 100,000 women in this community now.
Wow.
In the same situation as me. Like, what the hell's going on? And why don't we know about this? And then the book came from that as well.
Well,
and so the title, the title Menopocalypse, I know I'm a bit of a talker. The title Menopocalypse is it just literally felt like it was like the end of days for me when I was going through symptoms that impacted my quality of life, relationships, everything, and my overall health. But I felt like it was a really negative title, and I sort of wanted to say it can feel like that, but it doesn't need to. And that's sort of where the title comes from.
For those of you watching this on YouTube, you can see the book here, and it's bold cover with Amanda doing an impersonation right now. Out of interest, what were the symptoms you were feeling? You said you felt, you were going down a wrecking ball. What were you experiencing?
Well, so I come from a martial arts background, and I'd like let it go. And I found relief going to boxing classes. And so I used to go to a boxing gym and just used to, kick the shit out of and hit this boxing bag and feel really good and strong. And it was like such a release for me. And then one day I came home from the class and I just, that time when you feel like you've worked out too much and you're just bagged. And I was like lying on the sofa going, flipping heck, I just don't think I can get up again. And so I just felt really exhausted. But then the room was spinning. I got vertigo. I started throwing up, falling over when I stood up, and it just lost my equilibrium. And I thought it was a virus, actually, or maybe I'd just done too much. And it did go after a couple of days, but then it sort of kept reappearing and coming back and extending to the fact that I would lose feeling in my face and my vision, and my hands started to claw on one side. I thought I was actually having a stroke. And so I got sent to neurologists and ear, nose and throat doctors and vestibular rehabilitation centers, et cetera, et cetera. In addition to that, I started struggling with incontinence. And this is something that was really hard for me to open up and talk about because I'd had 2 kids in my late 30s and sort of bounced back. It sort of sprang back. And then all of a sudden I'm going for a run and I've literally pissed myself. And I'm like, oh my God, why did this happen? I didn't even know I'd done it. And then depression. And depression was something that I suffered with, but didn't know I had, because I'd never had depression in my life before. And it was only when I sort of saw this gynecologist and he said, you're suffering with migraines with aura. That's what the symptoms look and present themselves like. Incontinence is pretty common as you start to lose estrogen because it impacts the whole pelvic floor area. And you are depressed. You have depression and I can help you. And it was a relief, actually, to know that this wasn't the new personality and the new person that I was, because I'd completely withdrawn from life. And it was actually a relief for my husband and my kids to know that this was something that people know about and that we can help women with. But it was a fight, and it shouldn't be a fight. There's a massive knowledge gap and women are being underserved. And I think it's a health travesty personally, because it's not just a women's health issue. It impacts us on a social level, political level, economic level, cultural level. It's just wrong that we haven't spoken about this before. I'm just pissed off about it personally.
Yeah, and you make a good point, because until recently, I didn't really know too much about the ins and outs of menopause either. And a lot of our listeners are actually in the sort of 30 to 50 age bracket, with probably a lot around the 40 mark. So I think it's going to be really useful for them to hear from you on, to begin with, what is menopause? If you were to give a headline answer to what is menopause, what's happening on a fundamental level in the woman's body, what is it?
Yeah,
and also for a guy as well to understand what they're
right. Well, the first thing I was going to say is actually, it makes me so happy that you're asking this. I think men have a valid place in this conversation. It makes me feel happy. And I did an Instagram post about it. I think one of your team saw it, where I was like, please let male trainers talk about this, because male trainers make up the lion's share of our service industry. And women between the ages of 30 and 50 are our lion's share of income. And so the two have to meet somewhere, right? And so if I was to say what menopause is, I would break it down into 3 categories. You have perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause. And we have to talk about them completely. So perimenopause comes first, and perimenopause just means the time leading up to menopause, when our estrogen or estrogen, depending on what side of the water you're on, and progesterone start to decline. Progesterone falls in almost a slide manner, like a swooping slide, and estrogen falls in a fluctuating manner, think like a roller coaster. And it's these fluctuations in our estrogen that actually cause most of the symptoms. So they can start from our late 30s into our 50s. And the average age for average length of time that people can be in perimenopause is about 8 to 10 years. And so really that's where the conversation needs to start. So symptoms can present themselves. At the moment, we have a list of 34. Chances are it's a lot more. And they can be neurological, like mine, migraines, depression, anxiety, hot flushes, all of those different things. They can be physical, they can be emotional. Estrogen receptors are in almost all of our systems in our body. And so when women present with aching joints or IBS symptoms or heart palpitations, and they're in the age range, chances are it's as a result of their declining hormonal levels. When we get to the point where we retrospectively look back and say, oh, we haven't had a menstrual cycle for 12 months, well, that is a line in the sand, and that tells a woman that she is menopausal, she's in menopause. And there isn't any fireworks that go off, and there isn't a marching band down the street or anything. Nothing happens. It just is. And then everything after that time is considered to be postmenopausal or just menopausal. You're that for the rest of your life. The average length of time a woman is menopausal is about 33.3 years. And obviously there's a spectrum there because some people go in earlier and later. And so a woman potentially can spend a third of her life in a postmenopausal state where her reproductive hormones are at their lowest level. And then when a woman's estrogen and progesterone are at this low level, they then need to be aware that there are health implications that come because of that. And so taking care of our health and wellness is so much more important than ever before. So that's it. But menopause is the end of our reproductive years, and we're just in a completely new playing field, and it isn't all bad. And that's always my message. Perimenopause can be awful and no woman should suffer, but it's a menopause transition. And then as women come out the other side, statistically, life improves for them and symptoms die away.
So it's not an overnight thing. It's sort of symptomatic over time. And then you sort of gradually realize what's happening. Is that how it works? Or?
Yeah, and it makes no sense, right? So, what will happen is like you'll wake up with one symptom and it'll go away potentially, and another symptom will come out of the blue. It's literally like playing whack-a-mole with the symptoms, and so it can be very confusing. It's complex, and when women go to see their doctor and say, I don't feel like myself, because it's sometimes hard to pinpoint what's going on. The doctor might say, oh, maybe you've got depression. I'll help you out with antidepressants, and it's not really you get into the root cause of the problem. And so I would say to women, one of the things that's missing is this knowledge base. We have to start talking about it. It's why I wrote the book. Like, this is what you need to know, because when you know what's going on, rather than spending 2 years in an abyss like I did with doctors saying, we can see you're not well, but we don't know what it is, you can go to advocate for yourself. And one of the reasons you need to do that is because GPs do not get menopause training at all. And our OBGYNs, which are female health experts, potentially only get a few hours of menopause training. And that's only if they opt in to do it. So there's also like a gap in the medical system that is actually changing, thankfully, but it's incredibly hard for women to get heard.
So how did you deal with it from a mental health perspective? Because I'm assuming you were thinking there were issues with your confidence, self-esteem, confusion, all these cocktail of emotions, especially because you don't know if it's just a passing thing, whether it's, like you said, a symptom for something else that you'd normally sort of experience. How did you deal with it mentally, and how do you help your women?
Yeah, such a great question.
Probably a state of acceptance, because as you said, there's such a negative connotation around the word menopause.
There is, and also around mental health, right? And so menopause and mental health sort of come hand in hand for a lot of women, anxiety and depression being two of the major symptoms that women struggle with, and with no context really. I know with me personally, when the doctor said I had depression, I was like, hang on a minute, I was questioning my marriage, and I was questioning the fact, did I love my children? Did I even want to wake up in the morning? It was pretty bad. And so I think that when you're that low, you have to look at everything around you. And so I put things into context and was like, I wouldn't change my marriage. I actually am really happily married. I'm just not happy. I'm financially secure. I love my children. I have a good life. And so I realized that it wasn't that something else was going on. And so when the doctor put that into perspective, that this was a decline in our hormones, it made sense to me. And it actually lessened the burden somewhat. And so the things that I did to help myself and the things I encourage women to do is, one, know that there's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken and you don't need fixed, that this is a known symptom and you can get help. And that help can be in the form of hormone replacement therapy if it's appropriate for you, or antidepressants if they're appropriate for you. And then in addition to that, the hard conversations you have to have with yourself, that we all have to have, that are you doing too much? Can you lessen your burden of your lifestyle? Is there anything that you need to sort of shed in order to make your life complete again? Because, we have these burdens that impact us, all of us, and we just put up with shit, don't we? And so looking at my life as a whole was really interesting. I started saying no to a lot of things. I started taking time for myself, which no mother ever does, no woman ever does. Moving from the we to me mentality, where we always put others first instead of putting ourselves first. I started to realize that if I didn't put myself first, everybody else around me suffered. And so I would just take time to go for a walk or find stillness and then just be present. And we know that sounds really wanky and a little bit woo-woo, but we also know that it works, right? Working with ourselves to try not to be too focused on what may or may not happen, like catastrophizing things and not dwelling too much on the past, but being right here and present right now helps reduce the stress burden and actually puts things into context. And so every single day I found the time to do that mindfulness type practice. And it didn't need to be exotic. It was usually just me sat outside with a cup of coffee and listening to the birds. It was quite nice. And then in addition to that, remembering the importance of movement and exercise on our mental well-being, remembering the importance of nutrition on our overall health, and also building a community of people around me that I could talk to and I could share my experiences with. And I know from my community that women need that. They need to not feel alone and isolated, and they need to know that there's people out there that can help them.
One thing which I really enjoyed in the book, I think it was around page 19, is menopause beliefs. And a lot of these, I read them and I thought, I used to think these things like, one of the beliefs here was that your periods just stop overnight. And then after 12 months, you're in menopause. And then you had a couple more beliefs in here. And I think they will help the listeners sort of going through these beliefs and sort of clearing sort of myth from fact, because it probably helps the mental health discussion. Because when you have a bit more understanding of the between the myths and the facts, you can kind of rationalize and understand things a bit better. So unless you know them on top of your head, I can read them out and you can go through it, or you can
know some of them. And I know some of them. Yeah, no, you go through them. It's fine.
Yeah, you go through the first one, then your periods just stop, and then after 12 months, you're in menopause.
So your periods do stop. And after 12 months, you are in menopause, but it's a really shallow image of what menopause is. And as I've explained, perimenopause really is probably the most problematic part of the whole experience. And so I think that actually we should have more of a conversation about perimenopause than we do just menopause. Menopause seems to be like an umbrella term. And so, yes, it's way more than that. And it impacts us on every single level in our body. And I think if I was to say menopause is not just a women's health issue, we understand that now, how it impacts us in the workplace, how it impacts our relationships. And so, it isn't just a case of period stopping, unfortunately.
Well, that kind of links, you said relationships, you said menopause makes your sex drive take a nosedive. How does it impact libido and your sort of overall sex life as a woman?
So funny story, my son here, who is 19, his friend came around and saw the picture of the book, which you've just shown, of me trying to look strong and resilient. And he said, "Oh, is that your mum wrote a book? That's awesome." And he opened it up and he went, "It's about menopause." And he went, looks like a sex drive took a big nosedive here, Cameron. And my son's like, "Oh my God, shoot me now." Thanks, ma'am. So what we know is that estrogen and progesterone and testosterone are all female hormones that we have. And when they start to decline, testosterone actually declines in an age-related way. It just sort of coincides around about the time of menopause. They can impact our sort of sexual function. And so it can be from a physical standpoint, as in, the genital urinary symptoms of menopause mean that estrogen is not getting into the pelvic floor area. So women can have painful sex, dry vagina. I say vagina all the time now. I don't care. It's out there. Once you say vagina once, it's fine. Some tearing, or the skin gets very thin. Recurring infections, urinary tract infections, bacterial infections, and incontinence. And these can impact like our experience in the bedroom with our sexual partners, whether they're male or female. And then in addition to that, we also, like I've said, we've become potentially detached from our relationships when we're in the thick of it. And so it's not just the physical side of it. It's a complex thing to talk about, desire and libido. And so working on relationships is super important, like finding time to be alone with your partner, to talk to them, to look at them and hear them and listen to them and connect with them. All of those things are super important. And also lubrication. I want to put that out there. I think we need to talk about lubrication a lot, because essentially you need it. You need it when you're in menopause for the rest of your life if you want to have an active sex life. And you can have one, and you should have one if that's what you want, but it maybe needs to be looked at from a different perspective. And
what would that perspective be?
Well, I think that we need to look at this as not just like a physical act, that we need to know that the brain has a big impact in this. And when you listen to the sexual experts, we know that like the dopamine responses that we have, that we need to sort of find in order to get excited about this, maybe aren't as easy to access. So actually spending time to feel connected and fulfilled with your partner, even I'm talking about things like holding hands when you walk down the street, or like giving them a kiss and a hug when they come in from work, like just so you feel that connection again, because it's, and also not being afraid to sort of schedule sex, thinking, Saturday morning, 11 o'clock, if you bring me a cup of coffee up in bed, you're likely to get your leg over. And there's nothing wrong with that, because desire doesn't always come from like just seeing your partner and wanting to jump on them. Like it can be programmed, and then you can still enjoy yourself. And I think that just looking at this in a different light is okay, right?
Yeah, and how did you navigate your dip in sex drive, and how did that impact the relationship accordingly?
Yeah, it was pretty rough. I got to say, and it's still not an easy thing to navigate. But like for me, when I realized it was something that happened to a lot of women when they go through menopause, I just had to have the hard conversation and just say, listen, it's not you, it's me. Like I still love you and I still desire you. I just probably need prompting a bit more, and maybe you don't want to do that. And I might say no, and you need to know it's not you. And so we had these hard conversations, and hopefully your partner's respectful like mine, and he listened to me and just said, I understand and I'm here for you, right? And actually open communication and dialogue is, I think, key to this.
Absolutely. Now, there's a couple more beliefs of which we've kind of covered already, but the one I think will really interest the audience here specifically is menopause makes you fat. And I want to kind of follow up with the question around, is weight loss, fat loss impossible during menopause?
I have a whole chapter on that in my book called Why Am I So Bloody Fat? Because it's the question that I get asked about all the time. And so I think I talk about it as being like this slowly creeping flesh blanket that just like falls all over you. And so it's really interesting. So we know as coaches the principles of nutritional science that calorie deficit, energy deficit, however you want to talk about it, is key. And people will deny it. There's like people like Tim Spector out there going, calories don't matter, blah, blah, blah. And it's just not fair to talk like that when we understand that energy balance is the driving force between whether we gain weight, maintain it, or lose weight. And it doesn't change in menopause. And another thing we need to know is that our metabolism doesn't slow down. It doesn't it may slow down a tiny bit. What we're talking about, a digestive biscuit or something, it's not that impactful. In fact, there's a great study came out from Ponza. I'm pretty sure that you've seen it being in this business, where he looked at metabolism across the whole spectrum of the human beings. And he is literally the world's leading expert in this. And even women who are on hormone therapy didn't show a drop in metabolism until ages of 60, and then it only went down by 0.7%. So why do women put weight on when we know most of them do, right? Like, it's not even a joke. Like, it's something like 85% of women will put on at least 10 pounds. A lot of women put on the majority more of that. So a couple of things happen. Estrogen impacts almost every system in our body. So while energy balance matters, and it's still true, the hurdles in order for us to lose weight just become harder. You know, it's like climbing over a brick wall. It's just almost impossible, it feels like, but it's doable. So here's what we know. We know that our fat deposits shift. So we become more androgen in our sort of like shape. Essentially, if anyone's listening, we become more of a, from a pear to an apple shape. And most of the fat deposits is visceral fat. And we know that visceral fat, which is the fat that encompasses our organs, is a little bit more dangerous. And so we need to sort of make sure that we don't carry too much belly fat. We also know that other hormones are impacted by our estrogen, things like insulin, cortisol, ghrelin and leptin being our hunger hormones. I mean, I'm talking to you like you know this, but I'm just hoping that I'm helping people who are listening. And when our hunger hormones are saying to us, you're never satisfied and you're always hungry, then we're going to use that as a model for eating, right? And in addition to that, the symptoms can be so overwhelming that I remember, I'm looking at the sofa that I actually hate and want to burn, because I remember spending hours and days on the sofa and literally not being able to move. And not being able to move, having like really stressful occasions, so high cortisol, which we know can lead to cravings and excessive eating. So yes, I put weight on. When I sat and had an honest conversation and I looked at the data that said menopause specifically is not the cause of weight gain, I was like, well, that's bullshit. I'm going to find out why. And the more I dug, the more I was like, you know what? The reason we put weight on is literally we're not moving as much as we did and we're eating way more. And that's happening because of all of the circumstances around us. And it's that simple. But to lose weight when you're feeling like that, to me, is almost like pushing water uphill, you know? To me, if a woman is in a state where she's so symptomatic, she's not sleeping, we know sleep's impacts our weight loss journey. If she's not sleeping, if she's not moving, if she's eating too much and there's no control over that because she can't find that, if all of those things are happening, then work on those first. Get your head out of the sand and stop thinking that weight loss is the only goal and the only thing that we should be doing. We're so fixated on this because it's ingrained in us. It's been thrown at us for years. We have to be young and thin, right? It's everywhere. I'm like, get on top of your symptoms. Actually try and improve your sleep quality with or without medication. Get all of those big rocks sorted, right? If you're stressed, what can you do to improve your stress outcomes? Can you improve your sleep? Can you go for more walks? Can you talk to a therapist? Can you take hormone therapy? Are any of these things helpful for you? And I just think that when you start to get those things in place, you start to find a schedule for your exercise, and you start maybe looking at a diet in a more balanced way and having your treats occasionally and not all the time, things like that. Then the weight loss is going to be the outcome at the end, but it shouldn't, to me, be the primary goal. And I think that unfortunately it just is, right?
Yeah, generally speaking, even outside of menopause, one of the biggest reasons why people don't achieve their weight loss goals is an inability to handle their stress and emotions. So I can only imagine the hormonal environment and just the symptoms you're experiencing just makes that management even harder if you don't take control of it. And you mentioned,
and it's easier said than done, right? That's absolutely the point.
Yeah. And you mentioned training and exercise, and what are some of your recommendations here? Should it be intense? Is it a walk, or is weight training, cardiovascular training? Where does it all fit into the sort of helping manage menopause symptoms and overall health and wellness?
It's really good, great question. And you and I both know that in our industry, we've never had menopause as like a subspecialty or talked about. There is a couple of great courses people can do out there, by the way, now, if anyone's interested. But yeah, what do we know happens? Well, we know that, so for example, estrogen is one of the main drivers of our bone health. And it's the tensile bone strength as well. So even if we take calcium, vitamin D, K, all of those things, we know that the actual tensile bone strength, which is the inside of the bone, is impacted by our declining estrogen. We also know in the fitness industry from in our 30s onward, we start to lose muscle mass and potentially struggle to build muscle, like, never mind just hold on to it. And that's accelerated through perimenopause and menopause because the mechanism, the muscle protein synthesis mechanism, which essentially takes the protein we eat into the amino acids and then uses that to help with our muscle growth and build, that whole mechanism is also impacted. So we're going into perimenopause and knowing that holding on to bone and muscle strength is something we should be super aware of. And if we know that, then the best thing we can do for that, in fact, to me, it's like a no-brainer, a non-negotiable, is strength training. Strength training to me has so many benefits outside of, just getting strong and feeling good. But like from a health perspective, we know how impactful that is. And so actually like lifting heavy enough to create the stimulus for bone growth and muscle growth, super important. And women never feel like they're strong enough or capable enough. And we know they are. Like it usually requires a coach to say, just seeing you coming out of the Asda with 20 bags of shopping, love, I know you can carry more than 2 kilos in each hand, right? And so giving women the confidence to be able to start exercising again, to me is so great. And everyone's a beginner at every stage. There's an entry level for everyone. But so as well as strength training helping with those things, it's been shown to help reduce hot flashes by up to 70%. And that was in postmenopausal women as well. So it's never too late to start. It's now used in the protocol treatments for depression and anxiety. As we know, it's sort of there within the other treatment options. It's also helpful for longevity, reducing our risk of dying by 17%, so extending our life expectancy. So there's so many benefits for actually holding on to muscle as much as we can. But in addition to that, of course, we need our cardiovascular health to be tip-top too. And that can range from walking, swimming, running, Zumba, or your HIIT classes, whatever, like all of those things have a place. I mean, joy's got to be the driver of exercise, right? It has to be something you want to keep doing. But to me, I would say if every woman could do strength training 2 to 3 times a week and then fill it in with movement that they love on the other days, that's almost an ideal scenario for longevity and getting through menopause and aging, resiliently. And I just want to add to this is that I'm forever fighting back at this narrative that we're fragile and we have to do gentle yoga and we have to pull back. And somebody even said to me, oh, I've been told I can't do exercise more than 30 minutes because it makes me have like too much cortisol and it's making me, too stressed. And it's just an incorrect assumption that like exercise is bad for you and it increases cortisol. Well, yes, it does, but our body adapts to it. It's actually a positive outcome of exercise that, we learn to adapt with the cortisol and inflammation that exercise produces. And it's actually better for long-term stress. And so I think that like, it's really bad and really insulting to think that women can't do things when really the opposite should be happening. We should be saying to women, just do what you want. But my only caveat to this is this. During perimenopause, chronic fatigue is one of the worst symptoms. Like it's terrible. Energy receptors in our brain are impacted by estrogen. And so this bone dead fatigue that sees us lying on the sofa for hours, meaning we can't get out of bed. It's horrible. You don't seem to be able to sleep it off. Well, it's going to be really stupid for you to do a 1-hour HIIT class when you're feeling as crap as that. Listen to your body and think, maybe today's the day I just go for a nice walk outside. And then on the days where I've got the energy, then seize the fucking day and go and do the best workout you can, but be respectful of where your body is in the moment, right?
How do you judge that and not fall into the trap of every day becoming a walk in the park, or I'm going to give it another?
Yeah, it's a really great question. And I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but I do have a pinned post on my Instagram page at the top, because I did talk about it once and it sort of exploded and women were like, oh, I didn't realize that I had permission to make choice. And I call it structured flexibility, but I'm sure there's other names for it out there. But essentially every day, like personally, I would wake up and say, how do I feel on a 1 out of 10 level? And if I'm feeling 1 to 2, like my energy level's low, maybe depression's got me or chronic fatigue, then what can I do that's going to make me feel like 1 or 2 or 3% better? What's the small win I can get today? So when you flip the switch and say, how can I make this a positive outcome? Then it actually opens the door for possibilities. And so on those days, I literally would just get outside. Being outside changes your endorphins, right? And the chemical neurons in your brain. And so go for a 5-minute walk. As long as you feel better afterwards, you've won. And then on those days where your energy levels may be like a 5 to 7, so you sort of feel like I could do something, but I don't think I can do a full workout. Then understand that that's actually acceptable. Just do something. It's instead of the all or nothing mentality, it's all or something, right? So just do something. Because the chances are, if you go and work out on your own, or you go to a coach or a trainer and you go in and go, it's not happening today, you could sort of say, well, I'm going to work on my form. I'm going to work on my biomechanics, or maybe do some mobility work. Because usually when you start, you sort of go, oh, maybe I feel okay now and I might be able to do a bit more. And it's actually just stepping forward and just trying something. And I already said, carpe diem, the 10 out of 10 days, like do what you can when you can, but always know that having a belief system in yourself that allows you to step forward and gives you a win is actually going to change your perception of your decision as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And another post that's pinned to the top of your Instagram, which has gone pretty crazy, is your thoughts on hormone therapy. And just sort of the different scenarios where it's useful. And I know you've got a whole chapter in the book as well. So, what are your thoughts and considerations when it comes to hormone therapy for menopause?
Yeah, so my thoughts and stuff all obviously only come from the medical consensus, because I'm not a doctor, and so I never give out medical advice. But it's okay for me to share what the medical and menopause societies talk about. And so their stance is that hormone replacement therapy, which is actually called menopause hormone therapy globally, I don't know why it's called replacement therapy in the UK, is the first line treatment, almost gold standard for menopause symptoms that include vasomotor symptoms, which are the hot flashes, night sweats, cold sweats are another one, and that also impact your insomnia. So that's one of them. The other one is the genitourinary symptoms of menopause, which is the whole pelvic region. It can impact you in all of the different ways we've discussed. Also, it can be helpful if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, because it can help for that. That's actually all it's indicated for. But typically when women take it, they can start to feel better in other areas. Like it may help their depression or their anxiety, or it may help them sleep better, or their joint pain. And so even though it's not indicated for that, there potentially is some benefits along the way. The levels of hormones that you get are very low. They're not like they were when you were reproductive, like when you're in your 20s or 30s. It's a very low level, in fact, a lot lower than the birth control pill. And so it can really help women cope with their symptoms. And so if it's an indication for you and, there's no contraindications with other medications or health conditions, it should be something that every woman gets a choice to try. But then this is where my stance comes into. And I think that I don't think it should be radical to say this, but it seems that there's often pushback. But hormone therapy is not for everyone. So there'll be those women that choose never to take it. That's also fine. Those women that choose never to take it because they don't need it. They feel perfect. Menopause for some people is perfectly easy. Unfortunately, it wasn't for me, but like for many it is. Or for some, not for many, for some it is. Hormone therapy for me personally, and for some women, it doesn't work if you have hormone sensitivity. And I struggled to take hormones when I was reproductive. I could never take the pill. When I was pregnant, I had terrible pregnancies, lots of nausea, headaches. And as soon as I started to take hormone therapy, I tried every preparation over a 5-year period. It made me worse. And it didn't just make me feel bad. It made me have suicidal ideation. And it really was quite horrible. It made my migraines worse. It made my depression worse. And so it's like any medication. Not everybody can or should take it. And there's definite contraindications for those who have had some breast cancers. And so that's why there's alternatives. Alternative medications exist. And in the end, I had to take an alternative. I took an antidepressant for some time, don't need to take it anymore. And I took migraine medication for some time. And they really helped me and they really worked for me. And so that's what I try and do. I try and give a middle ground to women and say, don't worry if it doesn't work for you. You can try different preparations. And if hormone therapy really isn't the answer, don't worry, there's other answers out there. And the British Menopause Society have 2 handouts, one of all of the hormone therapies that are available and one of all of the alternatives that are available. So there's lots of choice for women.
And is this something you can get with your GP, or is this only private? Is it offered? How does it work?
Yeah, it should be with it. NHS have got regulated hormones that anyone can access. But unfortunately, like we said, that GPs tend not to have any training. That is slowly changing. The NHS and the British Menopause Society are slowly trying to get more GPs trained. But a lot of women will go to the doctors and they won't give out hormone therapy because they are stuck in the past where there was these headline news that hormone therapy caused breast cancer, which is something that's been corrected. But, you know, sometimes those old connotations stay there. Women who have hormone feeding breast cancers would never take hormone therapy. It just doesn't make sense, right? But yeah, women often get turned away. So what I would say to those women is there's a couple of things. There's symptom trackers online that you can download. Download one. On my website, actually, I have a resources section. So go to amandathebe.com. But the British Menopause Society has them too. Do a symptom tracker. Download the prescription guidelines from NICE. The NICE have prescription guidelines. Print them all off and then take that to your doctor and just go, these are my symptoms. I'm in perimenopause. If you're over the age of 45, you don't even need blood tests. You can get treated based on your symptoms. And these are the prescription guidelines that you need to follow. And often doctors don't know, and it can be helpful for them. It was when I went to the doctors, he went, I didn't know, thank you. And now I can change the way I practice. How do they know things they don't know, right? And so it can be helpful to go there really prepared. And then if the doctor still refuses to help you, ask for a referral. Ask for a referral to a menopause specialist. What's happened in the UK is there's now private clinics there that are filling the gap. But this is costing women hundreds and hundreds of dollars and pounds. Sorry, I'm in the wrong country. Pounds every month. And it shouldn't be that way. It's making menopause like an elitist sort of condition, right? Like, and it should be that everybody should have access to medication. And then there's the other thing in the UK where there's now shortages, right? So that's an added thing that's making things difficult. So, but yeah, I think that creating an environment when you speak to a doctor where you're in control, you advocate for yourself and you say, I know what this is. These are the prescriptions. I'd like to try this. And if someone refuses you and they're going against the NICE guidelines, you can actually report them. Not that I don't think many women would. You could say, can you mark it on my records that you refused me hormone therapy? And can you do me a referral, please?
That's really good.
It's hard though.
Yeah. You mentioned that some women don't experience any menopause symptoms, but you said there's not many. Like, how much is it? Is it one of those things that's completely on the spectrum where?
Well, there's stats out there. So there's stats all over the place. There's loads in the UK. There's some in Canada. Like, so for example, if I refer to a recent survey done in Canada, it was that 85% of women will have 1 to 7 symptoms. And 25% or 15 to 25% will have no symptoms. And then of the ones that do have symptoms, 25% will have, life-altering symptoms. So really severe symptoms. So it's most women. And here's the thing, 100% of women will go through menopause. I mean, the alternative is they don't live long enough to go through, right? So it's as inevitable as paying your taxes. It has to happen, right? And so I don't understand why we can't have more conversations like this so that women feel completely prepared. And when you're completely prepared, you have all the information, that's where informed choice comes in, right? You actually, as a person, can look at your own individual experience and go, I think I need to go and speak to a doctor about this. Or maybe, I've really neglected my lifestyle choices here. I haven't moved. I haven't been to the gym. I'm eating shit food and I'm drinking too much. And so when you have the information, you can make those choices.
What do you wish you knew all those years ago?
Yeah, that's such a great question. Well, first of all, I wish I knew what perimenopause was, because right then when I went into it at 42, it wasn't even on my radar. I hadn't even heard of the word. When the doctor said this is perimenopause, I went, well, what's that mean? Like I literally didn't know. But that was 10 years ago. I think I wish I knew about the neurological side of menopause, and this is really interesting. And it's not in my book because it's only something I've learned about over the last couple of years. I'm in a research study in New York with Dr. Lisa Mosconi. She's a neuroscientist. And there's a couple of neuroscientists in the US that are looking at brain scans. And what happens is in perimenopause, we see that our brain shrinks. And it shrinks to adapt for the fact that we're not going to be reproductive anymore. And so that's when a lot of women will have these things like brain fog and confusion, and they lose words and they feel like they're going through something like dementia. And it's really scary. And it's making women leave work and leave marriages, and it's horrible. But what we do know is that, and that was the reason for my migraines and my depression, it was like the brain adapting. But what these studies show and what the MRI scan show is that in that 3 to 5 year window after menopause, in the post-menopause phase, our brain starts to adapt, regrow, rebound to a fully functioning brain. Like menopause doesn't cause dementia. Women are more likely to get dementia than men, but menopause is not the cause because the brain has this ability to adapt. And when I went to have my brain scans and went through the review with Dr. Lisa Mosconi, who is someone you should follow for sure, she's amazing. All I remember her saying was, oh my God, your brain is so big, fat and juicy and your amygdala is like bulging. And I went, okay, thank you, whatever that means. But it just was really a relief. And I think it's a relief to a lot of women to know that even though estrogen is a major player in our brain health, the body actually adapts.
Yeah, amazing. Final question is, if you were speaking to a woman right now who thinks it's too late to take control of their health, their weight, their overall lifestyle, what advice would you give them?
Oh my gosh, there's so many amazing women that I follow on Instagram. I never thought that these would be like my inspirations, but there's women in their 60s, 70s and 80s that are strong. They've took control of their health. They reverse their diabetes, all of the health conditions that we're at risk for. I just think that it's never too late. And there was the one thing we spoke about where strength training helped with vasomotor symptoms, our hot flashes and hot flushes. These were postmenopausal women that had never strength trained before, and they got them to do a 12-week strength training program, and they reduced their hot flashes by 70%. These are women that had never been in the gym. And I just think that even that as an example is great. Go into the last third of our life knowing that we can be strong and resilient and that we're very, very capable. In fact, think of it as a non-negotiable opportunity that you should be striving to take.
I love it. Where can people find out more about your work, Amanda?
You just go to my website, amandathebe.com. It sort of leads to all things Amanda on my social media and stuff like that. You can find me there.
Amazing. We'll put the link in the show notes. And if you haven't gotten the book already, it's here, Menopocalypse by Amanda Thebe. Came out in 2020, right?
Yeah. It came out, and I'm terrible, I should know this, right? It came out, it's in its third year, yeah. It came out in COVID, and I was like, oh, I don't get to do a book tour, but actually it was really good because it meant that I had to do it all from home, and I could like promote my book online, and it's still got legs, it's still doing well, and in the UK and the US and Canada. So I think it's just, I wanted to write like your best mate's guide to menopause, but it's completely evidence-based. It's a little bit fun and lighthearted like I am, but it really is solidly grounded in science. And I think that women just deserve to know everything.
Amazing. Thanks so much for coming on, Amanda.
Thank you so much.